Lions traveling to San Francisco to play the Niners. 7 or 6.5 point underdogs are the Lions. 52% of the bets right now sitting in Detroit's favor. 72% of the money on the Lions. It's 24, giving them a 24% sharp differential. Total set at 51. And let me move the banner. There we go. Total set at 50.5 or 51 in some spots now. 56% of the bets on the over, 72% of the money on the over as well, giving that a 16% sharp differential. So notes there, Public's obviously split. A lot of money coming out on the Lions and testing now. Some books are testing 6.5. Some I also saw were testing 7.5. So it's kind of like really what books want to do at, specifically in this spot. And then obviously the Public and money back in the over. Instincts are to back Lions for me, the Niners for me. I think, like we talked about in the beginning, I think this is a bit of a dip for them, a dip spot for them. You've got the Lions having to travel, which they haven't done well at all this year, especially playing outside, not necessarily in a dome, although the weather's supposed to be okay. So you got the Jared Goff not in a dome trends to back you up if you want to back the Niners here. The good thing about the Lions defense is their rush defense. And the bad thing for the Lions is the Niners don't need to run the ball at all. And they can still get Christian McCaffrey involved because he's that good. And then the Lions secondary is the worst part of their team. It's been, I think they allowed, 6 worst passing yards in the league. Very bad against, their secondary is terrible. So I think Kyle Shanahan, like I said in the beginning, he's going to be very methodical, especially that's how Brock Purdy's been all year. Systematically finding his players, a West Coast offense style, if it's not there, move on. We'll figure out the next play. And then you're also saying that, the Lions defense being so good against the run, now you get Christian McCaffrey, and it's how much can you really stop despite how good you've been on the ground? So I think there's a lot of issues for the Lions defensively in this spot. Not to say that they can't score against the Niners defense, which obviously has been very good this year, but near the tail end of the year, the rushing defense kind of tailed off, and they obviously just allowed 18 carries and 100-plus yards to Aaron Jones. So you've got Jahmyr Gibbs and you got David Montgomery that are going to really be able to, hopefully for Detroit, make an impact. But at the end of the day, I think Shanahan and the Niners are going to force Jared Goff into tough positions and make him throw the ball into that elite secondary, and he's going to turnovers are going to happen. And the Niners are going to capitalize. I think they were just warming up, honestly, for this game.
I'm with you. I hate that we're taking both favorites. It feels like the simple thing to do, but it truly is kind of backing the dominant sides here, especially with the Niners team that has been so fantastic scoring the ball this season. The Niners have been really good scoring the ball in the red zone, whereas we've seen the Lions not so great in that area, especially when people get the ball into 20 yards and be within. The Lions have been pretty leaky in those tight quarters, as well as how the Lions fared against the pass. I mean, you touched on it, but we've touched on it the last 2 weeks now with the Lions, that when you throw the ball against them, that is where you find your success, and then running the ball is not really an option. I think the Niners have both those options readily available. I also think that there is the added element here of, sure, we have the Lions storyline, which is great, but the storyline that's not being talked about enough is that the Niners didn't even end up getting a legitimate chance against you guys last year. I think that they still would have lost. I still really liked the Eagles in that spot last year, but I do feel like there is just as much of a chip on the Niners' shoulder because the Brock Purdy injury happened and they didn't get their fair shot to go for the Super Bowl last year. Now they get to go again. It's going to be dialed up. It's a lot easier defense to navigate than the Eagles defense was to navigate last year. And they are going to be out for blood because they're likely going to be facing a matchup either in a Super Bowl revenge match against the Chiefs because they lost to the Chiefs the last time they made it to the Super Bowl, or it'll be against the Ravens, which is also a Super Bowl rematch for them, but more so a rematch of Christmas Day. So I think that there's a lot of motivation for this team outside of just this whole Lions narrative that, oh my God, the Lions might make the Super Bowl. I'm not in on it. And I do feel that, as you highlighted, the matchups are so favorable that despite the bets being 50-50, I don't see why it is that way. I think the Niners is a clear move here.
Yeah, I think it's tough. I think if people are going to be scared off, like the general betting public, not people that like really talk about it and bet a lot, are going to be scared off of the 7, be like, oh my God, the Lions being 7-point underdogs is a lot. And that's why you're going to see a lot of the public come in on the Lions. However, at the end of the day, this Niners team has showed us time and time again how dominant they were over this regular season. And I think the Packers game was not necessarily a fluke, but part of the, the injuries and the 2 weeks of rest and just the fact that 1 seeds don't typically cover both games. And so they had to be on the back end of the Ravens absolutely dominating. And, there you go. So they had to not cover just so the trends made sense. So at the end of the day, it's going to be really, really tough for the Lions to come in and win. And that's why I would love the, Niners in a teaser here. I think it's pretty simple to get them down to 1 or half a point. And even, what is the Lions money line? I'm just curious.
It's probably plus 250, plus 265 range, if I had to imagine.
Yeah, plus 280.
Plus 280.
Yeah. And it's only going up.
Yeah, they'll juice that up a tad bit more just to try to get more action on it, but you can't put it at the plus 300 range, I don't think, on a 7-point favorite. That's so rare to see it that high.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was just curious, but looking at like props and stuff, I know ESPN Bet has, I don't know if they still do, but they have an option to like not score a touchdown, because obviously all the books have to score touchdown props, but I think ESPN Bet's the only one that has not to score. Christian McCaffrey is currently minus 300 to score anytime touchdown. I would bet him not to score a touchdown, especially with this run defense that the Lions have, but it's not available in the books that I use, so I can't give that out, sadly. I wonder what the line
stupid.
Would be. It's insane.
Isn't that so dumb when you can bet on them just to score a touchdown, but you can't bet the opposite side? It's so stupid. There's so many other silly props that are like that, where it only lets you go one way. And I think that shit is so dumb, because they know that they would get legitimate action on the other side and then they'd have to make a real line. But instead, on these anytime touchdown prop scores, you have 3 different 49ers players that are at close to even odds to score a touchdown, plus Christian McCaffrey,
which is insane,
at minus 300. It's not worth it. And it's also not good value for the actual bet that you're trying to place. So they are a little bit more honest with some of them in the Super Bowl. But like in games like this, as well as the regular season too, it's fucking bullshit the way that they structure some of this with their props.
And I love to bet like anytime touchdowns, but I really hate the juice, and I really don't. I stick away from it when it comes to like single bets and straights. I really don't bet anytime. I'll throw it into parlay because it's fun, but like nothing too crazy when it comes to that.
Yeah, there's occasionally good values. Like I think like you and I don't know if we had talked about it on the podcast, but we definitely had talked about it to each other about like Jordan Addison towards the beginning of the season to score touchdowns was good value, whereas like plus 160 or plus 170 at times, sometimes closer to plus 200. And that was like a good value thing because you knew he was going to get his chances and stuff like that. But then as the season goes along, they pick up on it and you can't bet it anymore. So by this point in the season, they're just going to rip everyone off because they know they're going to get value. People's going to be like, oh yeah, I want George Kittle to score. Okay, here you go. Get it at plus 110. Thanks, buddy. Like that's such
when he scored how many touchdowns? Like that's a great example. How many touchdowns does George Kittle have this year?
I would vote no. I would say no. I think the one time that I played him in fantasy, he got 2. Besides that,
he's had 6 touchdowns this season, Andy. He's plus 110 to score a
2
touchdown.
Against the Ravens, I think.
Yeah, so he had 6. That's 1 every 3 games, and now you're assuming that it's 50-50 that he's gonna score in the NFC Championship game. That's insane. And obviously against this Lions secondary, there's an opportunity, so you got to factor that in. But still, we're getting off topic. That's a whole discussion for the offseason.
It's still talk about
big and stuff
for sure. It's still relevant, but totally agree. Do you have a prop you want to touch on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I have one too.
I'm actually leaning towards Jahmyr Gibbs' under on receptions. I think he's hit it in the last 2 games. He was over, so his line is consistently set, 3.5 most of the time. But he didn't hit it last week, or he did hit it, against Tampa Bay. He did hit it against Los Angeles. I think the Niners are really going to focus on limiting him because he has such that playmaking ability. I think that they're really going to focus on preventing him from getting out in space and getting those long wide screens to the secondary that is elite of the Niners, I think is going to be really difficult for Jared Goff, especially if, the front four are causing a lot of pressure. So I think they're going to have to resort to running the ball to get it in Jahmyr Gibbs' hands. And even when he has gone over this prop, he usually hits it like 4 or 5. He hasn't gone over 4 since week 11 against Chicago. So I really like under 3.5 receptions for Jahmyr Gibbs.
Yeah, and to your point, like dating back to Chicago, it was to end the regular season, he only went over that 1 out of the final 6 games of the year. So it's trending that way. Of course, when was Demont out? I can't remember if Demont was back by then, but he did have a lot more rushing yards.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like against Denver, he had 100 rushing yards. Against Minnesota, he had 80. I mean, he had a great game against both of his division rivals. But yeah, and the Minnesota game obviously was pretty irrelevant to them. I think that's definitely fair game. My only concern would just be because they're going to have to throw the ball even more, and he'll be if the defense continues good coverage, Jahmyr Gibbs will be out there on the side as that 3rd or 4th option, probably the 3rd look after the first 2 are gone for Goff. But we've also seen Goff be one of the absolute worst quarterbacks under pressure, and he's going to be under pressure a ton. And I think that when that happens, he's going to be looking to Gibbs more if Gibbs is there available. So I would caution that risk that even though it's not necessarily plays that are going to benefit the offense, he could hit that over just as that outlet for Goff as he continues to panic because, again, he's one of the worst quarterbacks under pressure. Mm-hmm. To that point, though, he might completely miss him because he shifts the bed under pressure, but we'll see.
Yeah, that crossed my mind as well. But I thought that the line would move if that were to happen. And because people would expect that to happen, and because it's the same that it was in LA and Tampa Bay, that's kind of like, okay, there's a reason that it's the same. People are going to want to bet this over as well, so that's kind of why I'm on the converse line. It's also the overs plus 110, minus is juiced, so I like the under.
I'm not that great of a bettor, but I almost want to say I think you're giving the general bettor too much benefit of the doubt that they actually think about those things before placing the bet.
Really?
Yes. I'm serious. I feel like people just see that and they're like, oh yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs, he's a passing back. Yeah. 3.5, easy. Over. So I don't mind the zag at all, especially like for Gibbs. I mean, you prefaced it too. You're like, I'm actually going to take his under. Like, that people are thinking about taking that over. That they're just
plus
thinking
110.
about doing it. So I think,
people are like, oh, Jahmyr Gibbs over 3.5 receptions plus 110. Yes, please.
Oh, I didn't realize that it's juice the over. Nice.
Yeah. Under's minus 146. So there's a lot of juice, but I'm okay with it.
Eat it. Eat the juice, baby. I'm going to go with a different route here. So one of my favorite props to do throughout the year, and I took it in the Niners-Ravens game, I think. If it wasn't that, then maybe it was the game before, was Brock Purdy's under passing attempts. And I was on this towards the end of last season, and it really was doing well as the season went along, where because the Niners would either get out to such big leads, plus they had McCaffrey to rely on, he wasn't passing a ton when they would set that total at 30.5 or the low 30s. It was consistently going under, where I think he only went over that typical 30.5 line that they would set in the New York Giants game in week 3. And then against Cincinnati at the end of October. And then he hit it in the Ravens game. Yeah, that's right, because I had the under in the Ravens game, and because he threw for 32 times to get him out of the hole. He threw for 39 times against Green Bay, DJ, which was by far his most this season. But that was only the 3rd time that it's gone over that number of 30.5. It's sitting at 29.5 for this game. And it just feels so low. But I'm going to tell you why. And I think it's just because I feel like they're going to get out to that lead. And he's not going to have to throw it. And McCaffrey, as you had touched on, is going to be more dependable than people expect against such a stellar rushing defense. But instead of trying to figure out if he's going to throw, like how many times Purdy's going to throw, I'm going to keep it really simple. We're going to take Brock Purdy lower than half an interception against the Lions.
That's a good way to take that bet. I like that. Less opportunities, yeah.
Yeah. So there was a fun narrative around Purdy of like how he never throws interceptions, yada, yada, yada. And it was true. Like the first 5 weeks he didn't throw any, and then he kind of slipped and he had 1, 2, 2 in the Cleveland, Minnesota, Cincinnati stretch. keep in mind, this was also the same time frame where Trent was out, where Debo was out, and I think McCaffrey was out for 1 or 2 games at that point too. So like he was panicking kind of when the system wasn't going his way. He slipped up.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that stretch, he's thrown 6 picks. 4 of them were in the Baltimore game. We all remember that. But then there was only 2 other games he threw. 1 pick against Seattle, and both of them were against Seattle. One against Seattle, and then another at Seattle. I really like this because I don't think that against such a inferior passing defense for the Lions that he's going to struggle that much. A lot of people have not struggled against this Lions team. Teams have not struggled to put points up against them as we've seen. I don't think he's going to have to take risks to try to get the lead back. They're going to have their game plan. He's going to be able to stick to the game plan, stick to the system. And I don't think that because I like the under on passing attempts, and that's something that I lean, I do think that he's still going to not throw it enough times to put an interception at risk for an otherwise really responsible and calculated quarterback.
Yeah, so, I like that too. I think that's a great way to take, not necessarily take his under, but they're not going to throw the ball more than they need to. And I'm sure all of the talks in between Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy this week have been take care of the football, because as long as they do that, they will win the game. That's how much better they are than the Lions. So that's all they care about.
I'm totally with you. DJ, the most legs you can put into an underdog lineup is 5, and we have given out 4. Do you have a fifth play to give out that you like in the prop market that we could potentially put into a fantasy lineup with underdog?
So we just say
20x payout.
Should we say fuck it and say a touchdown?
I don't mind it. You can do Mahomes rushing or receiving touchdown to 3x your payout.
Damn. I don't like that. I don't think he's going to be running one in.
I don't either. We've already got Lamar, though, so we can't take another Lamar.
Mine was going to be Gus Edwards to score a touchdown, because I was thinking about throwing him. I really think he's going to have a really good game. And he didn't score last week, right?
So you would have to. So if you did Gus Edwards on underdog, you can't do 2 of his in the same lineup. You can only do him one way. But you do get a 1.25x multiplier for throwing his rushing touchdown in there.
No, not worth it. I would, let's see.
So we'll stick with 41.5 rushing yards.
I like David Montgomery's rushing over. He did not have a good game last week, and they're going to have to run the ball if they want to win. And his type of running will be much better, I think, against the Niners defense. So I like David Montgomery's over.
Yeah, there was some pretty funny rushing trends for this one, where the Lions have averaged 6.8 yards per carry on rushes to the right side of the field in the last 4 weeks of the regular season. The Niners have allowed 5.6 yards per carry when defending on rushes to the right side during the final 4 weeks, tied for 7th worst in the NFL. For the Lions, that was 3rd best. I think it's kind of random, and I don't know how much they're going to force the right side. But then the Lions have been really good at yards after contact. So they have 2.9 yak, and then the Niners have allowed 2.8 yak, which is actually the worst in the NFL over the final 4 weeks of the regular season.
Yeah, so, that's a lot of Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs, I would guess.
Well, no, this is yak to running backs.
Oh, so yards after.
That's
carry.
big for that's big for Montgomery.
Yeah, that's good for Montgomery. Okay, cool. Yeah, I like his over 46.5.
You can get 43.5 on Underdog Fantasy. So
there you
go. We've got Lamar higher than 64.5 rushing yards. We've got Gus Edwards higher than 41.5 rushing yards. You just gave out David Montgomery higher than 43.5 rushing yards. I've got Brock Purdy not to throw an interception, so lower than half an interception. And then we got to throw in the Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to round out the play here at
lower than.
They don't have it on Underdog right now, but you can do 9.5 rushing attempts, or you can do lower than 75.5 rushing and receiving yards, 22.5 receiving yards, or 47.5 rushing yards.
Do lower.
I'm sure they'll have it up by the time the podcast releases.
Do lower than 22.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, as the secondary play. If you guys have the line for 3.5 receptions, then go with that. But 22.5 receiving yards, can't blame you there. $10
Cool.
wins you 200 each. I think that's what I'm going to do.
I love it. Easy money.
Easy money.
Never been more free.
Yeah, that's a fun little conference championship weekend lineup to do out.
This has been awesome. I'm really excited to get into this. And then, so our plan will be, obviously, we just kind of finished up the conference championships. We'll probably have a short episode next week, just kind of talking about the season, talking about what we think the Super Bowl is going to be like. We'll hit a little bit, maybe of some player props and stuff, but not necessarily what we're betting for the Super Bowl. And then the week following will be Super Bowl discussion purely, finalizing everything, kind of bringing up more trends and stuff. Probably 2 smaller episodes as opposed to like one big one about the Super Bowl. But we'll talk about it and let you guys know on Twitter if anything else changes. As always, appreciate the support. It's been so much fun. Excited to get into the championships week, Santi. It's going to be great.
You know what I'm even more excited for, DJ, is the random ass Super Bowl props that we're about to get here in just a few days. It's going to be absolutely beautiful to just see not your regular couple hundred bets next to one game. There's going to be several different menus to explore, and that is the beauty of the Super Bowl betting season. So I can't wait to get into that. Can't wait to dive into this conference championship a little bit more with you as the week goes along. Looking forward to your article that comes out on happyhoursports.net every Sunday. So be sure to check that out.
If you're watching on YouTube, link in description, as always.
Yeah, man. A pleasure as always. Best of luck. Let's cash this underdog lineup. We haven't done one of these live on the pod before, so I think it's fun. And yeah, the boys bet better with beer.